All right, so welcome everyone. This is the LEAP informational session for LEAP cohort 9. And this particular project is supported by the Office on Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this program are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Office on Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. So like I mentioned, we are here for LEAP, the Leadership Education and Advancement for Professionals program, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about what the project entails, what the eligibility requirements are, and a little bit about the history of the project as well. So a little bit about Zoom. I know we've all been on Zoom for what feels like a million years, so you probably already know these things, but if you don't, like I mentioned, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. If you have a question you want to ask, go ahead and use the hand raising function at the end of the webinar, and I'll be able to get to you and unmute you. And then we do have one polling question that will pop up for you. If folks are dialing in from their phones, just a reminder that you can press *6 to unmute and mute yourselves. And then, like I mentioned earlier, slides and recording will be available on the LEAP website. I will send it out to all the people that have registered and attended and that are on our newsletter. So like I mentioned, you can rewatch or share it with your colleagues. Appreciate everybody on the call who has already shared the application and the information session with their colleagues. That's really how we get more people to get involved in the project. So thank you all for that. And then, as I mentioned, I am Marcela Rojas Salas. I'm one of the project managers here at Valor and one of the lead managers here that guides folks through LEAP. We have a lot of other folks that have been a part of the LEAP project that couldn't be here today, but if folks have heard from their colleagues that have been part of the LEAP cohorts in the past, they probably knew about Leah Aldridge and Sandra Enriquez and Gloria Terry and Tanya Lovelace and Samaya Coleman and so many other folks. I just had to say their names. It feels wrong to not say and mention everyone who's been a part of building the project and also teaching me so much about what it looks like to run a cohort of people of color who are going through a leadership development program and really trying to build community virtually. Right. And I think there might be someone who is not muted. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. If you notice that you're not muted, please go ahead and mute yourself. For some reason, I'm not able to mute folks. Thank you. Give me a second here because I don't make sure that the background noise is not coming up for anyone. Here we go. All right, so moving on, and if you haven't introduced yourselves yet, go ahead and introduce yourselves. We're just doing name, pronouns, organization, and region, your years in the movement, and that includes volunteer and staff experience, and then any sort of favorite fall or Halloween activities that you have going on this month. And looking through the chat again, I see folks from Texas and Oregon and Washington and St. Louis and some folks in Vegas and Albuquerque. So welcome everybody across the country. Super happy to be here with you all today. So what we have on the agenda today, we have a little bit of information on the catalyst for the LEAP program. Always want to be able to add some more historical context to why and how the program was created. And then an overview of our LEAP program application requirements, our program goals, and our program structure. So I have a quick poll question just because I do like to know how folks heard about the application. Was it a friend or a colleague? Was it a newsletter or email, social media, or if it was something else, let us know in the chat. And as I'm seeing folks vote, I'm seeing a lot of people heard from our newsletter or an email or a friend or a colleague. Very cool. Nobody has said social media yet, so that's interesting. Folks probably don't follow us on our Instagram account or Facebook. I see Patricia says a consultant from Oregon shared this with you. Awesome. Well, thank you to that person who shared that with you. Paloma, you're sharing that your supervisor shared this with you. Thank you to your supervisor. Gabriela saying, I don't fully trust social media ads myself. Understandable. Want to be mindful of what's being shared on there. Lorena, yeah. So email and supervisor as well. Awesome. Wow. Good to know that our email blasts are working and that your colleagues in the movement are doing their due diligence in terms of sharing the program with you all. All right, so moving on to what the catalyst was for the LEAP program. And oftentimes when we create a program that's specifically for communities of color, it's usually because we're recognizing that racism exists within our field, within our society. And so that certainly is true for the LEAP project. And particularly women of color were the folks that really built this movement. I know that I've had many conversations with my colleagues about how women of color were the grassroots organizers for this movement when there was no funding, there was no volunteer hotline yet. Government funds were not being distributed. And then it became much more professionalized, right? And so what we now see is that there are few women of color in leadership roles and even less in executive roles. And what we often see as well, when women of color do enter those high-level positions, they continue to be terminated or forced to resign or pushed out in some way because of discomfort and microaggressions and macroaggressions. And another piece of this too is that we often don't get the leadership development to be able to build our skills and knowledge. I know that I've spoken to so many advocates that have been part of a lot of advocacy trainings on trauma-informed care, trainings on eradicating racism in our field, but very few have been focused on personnel management, how to become an effective manager, how to get involved with the board in a meaningful way, or how to look at a budget and be able to advocate for your program to have certain things allocated towards it, right? And so we're really good at code switching, but it's not always intuitive in terms of learning how to work with a board, how to, guide when you're a new manager, to guide your advocates and coordinators in a way that is really meaningful, that is trauma informed, and that is, really providing that sort of guidance. So we often find our mentors and our guides through the movement, but we don't necessarily have a container where all of that information and all of that can be shared with ourselves, with each other. And so that's really what we hope to do, to be able to see a higher representation of leaders of color. We know that when there aren't leaders of color in our organizations, it has an incredibly detrimental impact on survivors of gender-based violence. When our visions aren't also included in those conversations in the boardroom, or when we're strategic planning and thinking about how we can provide culturally responsive services to survivors and how we can create curriculum that's specifically for youth of color who are part of our prevention programs. People don't always see our organizations as organizations that communities of color can go to. So often I've heard, well, that's the white ladies organization, right? And so what is there for me there? And so we really want to be able to see this sort of infographic that I have up here completely not even be relevant anymore, but I continue to use it during every single info session. And if folks haven't seen it before, I'm going to drop the link in the chat, and you can reference it in your trainings if you'd like to. But essentially what you see here, and it's a little bit small, so I'll share what's on here, is that a woman of color enters the organization of which there might be predominantly white leadership, or perhaps this is a culturally specific organization, because I don't want to say that culturally specific organizations don't have similar issues, right? We still live within a white supremacist culture, a dominant culture in which even people of color within our own organizations can be impacted negatively. Oftentimes because our funding streams really want us to uphold the status quo, And so I see a lot of shifts happening within our funders and lots of aha moments that have happened over the last several years, but there's still a long way to go. And so back to the infographic, women of color often experience a sort of honeymoon phase at first, but later start to notice some more tokenization and discrimination happening within the organization. And this is when it becomes our responsibility often to point out issues within the organization and try to work within the organization structures and policies to push for more accountability. But I think that often also comes with resistance as well, and experiencing more micro and macro aggressions for standing up for ourselves or perhaps standing up for our staff. And this is where some sort of like gaslighting and denial of racism and comes in. And at the same time, there's this sort of heightened responsibility for the woman of color to be the one who's fixing the program or fixing the partnership, or to fix the culture of the organization, quote unquote, fix it, right? Rather than really seeing this as a collective effort, rather than seeing this as a change that needs to happen across the board with all of our staff. And I'll give a quick shout out to one of our podcast episodes, which I'll talk about later, where Toby Downing talks about, she becomes a director at this organization, and 3 weeks in, her leadership team is like, why haven't you built some relationships with our Asian community and that's local to us? And she goes, well, you can't build relationships with a community that hasn't been served by us in 3 weeks, right? And so having this sort of like heightened responsibility and expectations can be detrimental to our psyche as well, right? I hear a lot of people talking about imposter syndrome and having this expectation that we're going to ameliorate all the racism within our organization simply because we've hired a woman of color, we've hired a person of color. That goes back again to that tokenization. And so, again, back to the infographic, ultimately the organization might label our staff of color or women of color as conflictual or aggressive, or not having the right communication skills when communicating these issues, or claiming, that this woman of color is not qualified or perhaps not a good fit to be hired. And then is pushed out of the organization. And so there's some really covert and overt ways that these things happen. And so this is where LEAP really comes in, where, I'll be frank that we provide training to help people with their leadership development, but that doesn't necessarily always change the culture of our organization. And so I want to be clear about that, right? We're not saying that this is going to eradicate racism in the field. It takes a lot more than leadership development training to do that. But being able to build our collective power and organize and mobilize with ourselves is something that I highly encourage within this cohort. I highly encourage outside of this cohort. And that's a piece of the puzzle, right? Is being able to learn more about the women of color in our field and what they're doing, and highlight what they're doing, and connect with each other, and brainstorm and strategize with each other in terms of all the different problems that we're coming up against in our organizations. So now, why LEAP? A Women of Color Network was one of our partners during the beginning stages of the LEAP project about 9 years ago. And in 2011, they came out with a report titled Women of Color Leadership, a look at the experiences of women of color executives in the anti-violence against women's movement, which I will drop this report in the chat for folks that want to read this a little bit more deeply and find out what kind of data came up and storytelling came up. But we learned so much from Women of Color Network and our partner in terms of the lack of opportunities that women of color were not experiencing, right? And so we found that there was a huge, steep learning curve when it came to having meaningful fiscal involvement in the organization, board involvement in the organization. I've seen managers and directors be part of leadership development and skills development conversations during the LEAP project, and have said, I've never been able to look at the budget. I've never ever spoken to the board. And so this has been sort of a way for folks to either advocate to be part of that process, or to feel like they're really confident and ready to be part of those conversations and to help guide the executive director or CEO who may have that sort of direct contact with the board and more experience with finances and budgets. And then also the other piece of this is sort of this lack of mentorship and networking among women of color, at least opportunities where we have a specific container where we connect with each other. I think that I don't want to say that hasn't existed. I do want to say that it exists, but I think it's something that is often informal. We find each other at conferences, or there might be a caucus, or there might be a monthly meeting where we are able to connect with each other. But this is a cohort where we're with each other for 9 months, and we're seeing each other, several times a month for leadership development and community building. So really, again, having that container for folks to connect. And also there's another report that I will mention that in terms of general nonprofits, is that women in corporate businesses found a lack of informal networking, role models who were members of their racial and ethnic groups, access to sort of high visibility assignments, and influential mentors that often can help sort of break that glass ceiling, or help folks get connected to positions in higher level positions. And we often see that in our own field. I'm seeing some folks drop some questions in the chat. Someone said, I'm not in anti-violence work. Is this still the right fit for me? So the eligibility requirements, I'll talk about that in a second here, but yes, the eligibility requirement is for folks to be part of the gender-based violence field. And yes, I did share that link again. Carla, let me know if you didn't get access to that, or if you have trouble with it. So like I said, what we really aim to do is to create a space for women of color and people of color seeking executive level positions, and that sort of development and mentorship from folks who have that experience. So that's really what we're hoping for, to bring folks together with each other in the community. Okay, awesome. You were able to access the link. All right, so now moving into program application requirements. Here's the eligibility. So I answered the eligibility question a little bit early, but yes, you do have to self-identify as a woman or a person of color. You must either be in a executive director, or manager position for at least 1 year at an organization addressing gender-based violence. You must have at least 1 year of experience supervising staff at an organization addressing gender-based violence, and a commitment to the sexual assault or domestic violence intervention and prevention field. One thing I'll note right now is that we have had folks join from the anti-trafficking field as well. So it's gender-based violence is all encompassing in terms of this field. So domestic violence, sexual assault, folks from local agencies, folks from training and technical assistance organizations are welcome. There are some folks that have been part of higher ed that have been part of our program. I will be frank that most of what we share will be relevant to higher ed, but it is very nonprofit specific. A demonstrated experience in developing diverse agencies and programs that include women of color and individuals from underserved and underrepresented communities. And then be able to fully commit to the LEAP 9-month program period and requirements. We know that folks are really busy. I know especially folks that are doing crisis intervention work and that are in management positions will often come to the webinar and be like, all right, I gotta take a hotline call, or there's an emergency that came up. So we do record all of our sessions so that you can watch them later on if you weren't able to be fully present or had to step out for a second. Someone's asking, I have to ask, what do you consider a woman of color? It is a common word, but wanted to clarify. Yeah, so I mean, I've also heard folks use the term Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I identify as a woman of color because my family is from Mexico. So that's my ancestry and heritage is from Mexico. Let's see, what if previously in management and supervisory position, but not currently, will it still be possible to apply? You're still able to apply, but we will take that into account when we're doing our scoring sheet. But Dominique, if you want to send me an email with a little bit more detail about your experience, I can give you a sense of how likely you might be to be able to be part of the program. And I have someone asking me how many hours a week should we expect to commit. Let me come back to that question because I do have a slide on that. And so a little bit about the LEAP application, I'll drop it in the chat, but folks, if you got the newsletter, you got the email from your colleagues, you probably already have it. But just so I make sure that everyone has it on this call, I'm going to drop it in the chat. So there is a Google form that you'll be filling out, and there'll be questions about your experience in the field, and getting a sense of, what is your experience doing program development? What's your experience with strategic planning? I've seen folks check off expert for all of them, thinking that might be helpful in their application. It actually isn't as helpful because we want to see that you still have things to learn, that you're still in the phase where this program will be relevant to you and helpful to you. And if you're in an expert position, you might be better suited to be a consultant on a project like this. Let's see, you will need approval from your board and executive director. We really want to see that you have institutional support from your leadership to participate, because we do have trainings that occur during the workday, and we want to see that your executive director or CEO or direct supervisor does support you in participating and doesn't create more barriers to participation. And then we would like to see a cover letter and resume from you. The cover letter does include questions directly that you'll need to answer, which I will drop in the chat, but again, they're also in your application. But I highly, highly recommend that you read and reread these questions. We did receive some cover letters where folks didn't answer the questions, and so we do have to keep that in mind. You know what? It won't let me copy and paste. I don't know. Well, I was trying to be helpful and copy and paste that in the chat, but folks will have to look through it in the application link. And then last but not least, your bio and photo will also be requested during the upload of the application. Carla is asking, is there a limit of leaders accepted per cohorts? There is a limit, yes. Our limit tends to go between 20 and 24 folks. And we do interview folks. So let's see, how long back will you consider experience in a management leadership position? So Vicki, we only need folks to have 1 year of experience in management and leadership position, but our priority is given to folks that are in a current management or leadership position. Let me know if I answered your question though, because it sounds like you're probably asking, you were a manager before and aren't a manager now. So like I mentioned, we are prioritizing folks that are in management positions currently. Isela, would I still qualify if I'm in an informal supervisory position, no manager title, for example, leading a committee within an agency and overseeing projects and staff? Like I said, we are prioritizing folks that are in management and director and executive director positions. We do get a high level of applications, so it does you do get more points if you're in that position already. But you can still apply. Just keep in mind that you'd be in better position to apply at a time when you are in a management position. Are there geographical areas we're looking at? So it is the United States. It includes all territories and states. So it is specific to the US. Erin, what if I'm the executive director for my org, but still need help with all of these leadership skills? Yes, absolutely. You can still apply. And yes, very courageous to be vulnerable about that. We'd certainly have executive directors that will share. I still haven't learned this stuff because nobody taught me. Like I mentioned, most of us get advocacy training, but we don't get training on how to work on budgets or board development or strategic planning. We're sort of just like stumbling through and figuring it out while we're doing it. Michelle, my direct supervisor, is the deputy chief program officer at the agency. Will her approval be enough, or do I also need the ED approval? I would say if your supervisor's approving of it, that's okay, but I would recommend also just letting your executive director know, hey, I'm going to be applying for this. My supervisor has approved my participation, but I just want to confirm that I also have your support as well. I don't know how, I don't know how your structure works, but it's helpful if everyone kind of knows that you're participating so that, halfway through the project, your ED doesn't find out that you're participating and they're like, well, I didn't know you were doing that. So just give them a heads up. Yeah. Someone asked again, how many people on average are accepted? Usually, versus how many apply. It's usually about 50% get into the program. But I think every year we get more applications, so that number does change, but I'm going off of last year. Crystal, is there a cost for the program? So there's no cost for the program. There's no payment. The only piece is that for the last 3 years, all of our webinars and academies have been virtual. So people haven't had to pay for travel. And so I anticipate that our second academy that will occur in either September or October will be in person. So while we do offer scholarships for travel, not everyone will have access to a scholarship. So that piece of the puzzle will need to get paid by either your organization. And if not by your organization, then it will need to come out of pocket. Lilia is asking, is travel involved? Yeah, so I'm thinking October or September, October, maybe around the time that travel will be happening. Let's see, Gabriela saying, I'm an independent artist that's been molding her own business. As an independent artist, my art focuses on depicting the journey of healing from sexual abuse and return to self. Through my journey, I volunteer with local nonprofits. A nonprofit member forwarded me this information. If they provide a letter of approval for this, will that be acceptable? I need help. Yeah, so I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about your business, because this is really very service focused and educational focused. So if you're running sort of like social services and prevention education and community organizing, this will likely be more relevant to you. I don't want to close this off to you. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your business to see if it would be the right fit for you. But yes, let me share a little bit more or email me and we can chat about that a little bit more. Carrie, I'm a US citizen and resident, but I do work in management for a sexual assault center in Ontario. Does this mean I need not apply? Ontario, you're talking Canada, right? I'd have to double check. I'm pretty sure that folks do need to be part of either the state or territories. But Carrie, if you can send me an email and make sure that I get back to you, I'll double check and get back to you. I always want to say yes to you all, but I have to remember that may not be the truth. So I've got to double check. Deep D, will this opportunity be open to other regions in the near future, as I'm from the Pacific? Which part of the Pacific are you in? If you're part of one of the territories, I know there are folks that have been part of the Guam coalition that have joined us, and so that would be certainly acceptable. Frida, I'm a finance manager, so a part of leadership, but not technically a supervisor of staff. Do I still qualify? You are missing one level of the qualification if you're not a supervisor. You can certainly apply, but I would like to just mention that the scoring will be a little bit lower for that section. And it is very program heavy. So if you feel like you are wanting to learn more about programs and strategic planning, this will definitely be relevant for you. But if you're looking for more, technical training on finances, we mostly get to the 101 level. So just want to be transparent there. All right. So I'll get to your question. I see like 21 chat questions, so I will get to them, but I just want to pause a little bit so I get to this piece of this. So our estimated timeline, we've already released our applications October 4th. They will close on November 18th. We've already received some applications. And then we'll start reviewing applications in November and December, and we're hoping to do interviews in December 2022 and January 2023. And then our notification will go out in January, and our cohort will begin March 2023. So back to your question, Ty, how long is the program? So it starts March 2023 and it will end October 2023. Sorry, actually November 2023. So our last academy will be in September, and then October and November will be when folks are working on their Pay It Forward projects, which I will talk about a little bit later on. All right, so now LEAP program goals and structure. Our goal really is to build upon and enhance the professional capacity of women and people of color, executive directors, senior directors, and senior managers in the gender-based violence field, to create a community of support and professional network for emerging people of color executives, management leaders, aimed at reducing isolation, maximizing skills development, information sharing, and communication. So we do have Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups and Google group emails that folks kind of connect with each other between the webinars and the academies, where typically I see a lot of questions around personnel management and, you know, sort of challenging experiences that folks are having around retention and lots of folks leaving the field. And then also to optimize the success and effectiveness of emerging people of color leaders by providing opportunities to impact spheres of influence in communities through paying it forward. So here's the program structure. One piece of the puzzle is intensive and interactive one-on-one coaching. So this past year, all of our coaches were past LEAP cohort members and leaders that had gone through coaching. And typically what I see folks talking about, again, is really around personnel management. A lot of folks were having conversations around living wages and retention practices, and how do we advocate to be able to pay our staff more. We have 2 academies. In the past, they've been in person. I anticipate that our first academy will be virtual, and then our last academy will be in person. And typically they are 3 days. It'll run from 9 to 2 on Pacific time, 12 to 5 Eastern time. And then we have small group coaching. So our small group coaching is about an hour long. And it'll be around finances and budgets and board development. And so there are 4 of those sessions. And then we have web conferences. We'll have about 6 to 9 web conferences. And the web conferences will be around program development and sustainability, organizational development, organizational media and public speaking, strategic planning and evaluation, human resources, and cultural capacity building. And then we'll have also some webinars on how to build your Pay It Forward project. Oh goodness, I see Dominique asked a question around, will my contact info be sent out? Yes, I will send out my contact info, but she will not see it because she's gone. So I'm sorry, Dominique. Sherry's asking travel to where? Typically it's been in Texas, but it changes. So I couldn't give you the location right now. Someone's asking, is there an estimate of how much will be spent on travel over the course of the program, and how many times and for how long we will be expected to travel? There's travel only one time. An estimate, it depends on the location we'll be going to. Typically we try to find the cheapest hotel and the cheapest plane tickets. So my estimate would be like $600 for travel and room. Okay, sorry, going back to LEAP program expectations and opportunities. So with the webinars and the skills development coaching, those are things that we set up for you. I'm your guide, so I set up all of those and the schedule is put in place. But in terms of one-on-one coaching, it is the responsibility of the participant and the coach to be able to schedule those things. Oftentimes this is the piece that people don't participate in because they didn't schedule a one-on-one meeting during the month that they, on a monthly basis. If I hear that you're not scheduling, I'll try to remind you and say, hey, I heard you haven't met with your coach. I will try to remind you, but it is generally the responsibility of the participant to schedule those things with their coach. And then also, expectations around training and networking. You really get the most out of this cohort if you're able to participate in the webinars, if you're able to actively participate and connect with your colleagues during the cohort. And then impact projects. So we do have the Pay It Forward project, which we're really encouraging folks, and it is a requirement of the program, to take what you've learned from this cohort and to be able to share that with your local community. Like I mentioned, there will be webinars on building up your Pay It Forward project. And I want to be really clear. I don't want you to come up with like a whole new mentorship program or a new leadership development program or a new program for your community. It really is like a training, a one-time sort of project, or maybe you create a really small toolkit. But I really help with like creating your scope of work because I know folks have some big visions and I want to make sure that folks are doing what's possible within that time frame. I also invite folks to participate in blogs and podcasts. So we do have the Leadership Moves podcast, which I'll talk about later on. And I do invite folks to write blogs about their work or areas of interest that maybe they're not able to talk about within their own organization. I have some folks from the last cohort that were talking about transformative justice and restorative justice and how that's been something that there's been resistance for, but also a lot of embracing from communities of color. And so with these blogs and podcasts, the topics and ideas and conversations are really led by the LEAP fellows. Okay, so here's the tentative program schedule. So February 2023 will be when we have our LEAP orientation. March 2023 will be when we have our LEAP Academy, our first LEAP Academy. And then in April 2023, which I know is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so folks will get this schedule ahead of time so that they can kind of plug those things into their schedule. We'll have 2 small groups and then 1 webinar. The small groups are 1 hour each and the webinars are 2 hours. And the same goes for May 2023. In June 2023, we'll have a webinar and then a Pay It Forward office hours, which again, will be helping folks create their scope of work, get a sense of what they want their topic area to be and the community that they want to share this with, and their sort of communication plan to get folks to participate in their project. And same goes for July 2023, 1 webinar and 1 Pay It Forward office hours, same for August. And then in September, we'll have 1 webinar for 2 hours and then the LEAP Academy, and then November 2023 will be when your Pay It Forward project is due. Someone asked about how many hours do you anticipate you'll be a part of you'll be able to participate in the program. It's anywhere between like 3 to 5 hours. I think you go ahead and add on your coaching session too. We do have monthly coaching sessions. It could be more too. I know that there are some folks that once they started working on their Pay It Forward project, that time increased to do a little bit more research on the topic area that they wanted to present on or write about. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the chat. Can more than 1 person from the same organization participate? We've had more than 1 person participate, but they were in different offices and they had different positions and were in different departments. If you're the CEO and the COO, that's less likely to be, I would say, less likely to be accepted in the project. This isn't me saying don't apply, but we do want to see some differences in who's applying. Nicole, I'm not eligible now, but I would like to apply next year. How can I make sure I'm in the loop for when the next application starts? Can you just send me an email and I'll put you on our listserv and make sure that you get all our updates. And make sure that, yeah, you can you can apply for the next cohort. And let's see, Deep D, Fiji Islands. I'm going to write that down and just confirm that you're eligible. And I have your email from your registration, so I'll go ahead and reach out to you. Let's see, Evelyn, I was just promoted into a manager role, but I have not been in this role for a year. Should I wait until next year to apply? Yeah, so I think your eligibility would be, yeah, I would recommend applying next year to help with your eligibility. Oh, Dominique is back. Yes, so like I said, I'll send you my email once I get to that slide. Is there a distinction between supervisory experience of students, grad assistants on staff, and professional staff? So there's no distinction. I do see like there often is difference between supervising someone who's providing direct service work versus supervising folks that are creating programming. But if you have a year of supervisory experience and you're in a management level position, then I strongly encourage that you apply. Clara, who are the coaches? The coaches change every year, but in the past, they've been folks from the past LEAP cohorts. Will the training also include how to develop podcasts and or effective blogs? So we don't have any webinars that are specific to developing podcasts or effective blogs, but I do work with you on if you want to be part of the podcast. So you'll have some sense of how the production goes and participating in interviews and creating content, but we don't have a specific webinar on that. But I'm happy to provide just like individual TA if you have any questions on those things. So that's another piece of this that I didn't mention is you're going to have trainers from past LEAP cohorts and coaches from past LEAP cohorts that will really be guiding the facilitation of those webinars. But if you have other questions, I'm also happy to provide technical assistance on the pieces that I also have that expertise in. Do I have the scheduled dates, days, and hours for the program? I don't have, they're tentative and I don't want to send them out because they might change. But this is as detailed as it gets that I have on the screen right now. Let's see. Someone's asking me for our IG handle. I can do that, but I have to look it up on my phone right now to make sure I don't send you the wrong one. Let's see. It is _Valor US, I believe. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I have to go back to look for the questions again. Where did I leave off? So Aaron just asked again if there's a cost for the program. There's only cost for travel, room and board, and food for the second LEAP Academy. So there's no cost for participating in the trainings. Summer, I've been promoted to interim supervisor, but wouldn't be in this position for a full year before the term ends. Are there suggestions for other qualifying supervisory experience when you have limited opportunities in your organization? I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. Do you mean like other training opportunities or other ways of getting into the program? Feel free to unmute yourself to clarify too.
Yeah, are there other suggestions for other ways to get into the program? I mean, it seems like a really great program for leadership experience, but there are just very few leadership opportunities within our organization. And usually they're not going to last more than a year.
Yeah. Do you have past supervisory experience? Can you speak to any sort of experience you've had in the past?
No, I've just been doing the advocacy thing for many years.
Yeah. Okay, shoot me an email and let's chat a little bit more about what your experience has been, and then I can kind of help with what you can include in your cover letter.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any of your questions.
I think you may have missed mine.
Can you
I had
repeat
another
your
one.
question? Sorry, I'm like losing myself in the chat.
That's okay. I'm the founder, CEO. Am I eligible? I have previous experience as an ED and program manager.
So if you have, yeah, so if you have all of these right here that we have on the screen, identify as a woman of color, person of color, you have that supervisory experience, experience with developing diverse agencies, and are able to fully commit to the LEAP 9-month program, then you are eligible.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see. Would an assistant manager be allowed to be part of the cohort? This shelter manager is a white woman, so the director recommend that this is something I do. Yeah, so if you have supervisory experience, you are eligible as a manager. Shakiria, would this be an email to the LEAP email? Which you can, yes, you can email LEAP at Valor US, or you can email me. Both the LEAP at Valor US email goes to me. Sorry, my eye is watering. Okay, and then now I'll drop my email in the chat. Okay, so now I'm going to share some words from Tanji Reese, who was a LEAP graduate from, I believe, cohort 5. So actually, let me stop sharing my screen and make sure I've shared my sound. And feel free to continue asking any questions. If I missed your question, please do drop it in the chat again. I apologize if I missed it. Okay.
Hi, my name is Tanji Reese, and I am the founder of 1124 and a part of LEAP Cohort 5. My time in LEAP was invaluable. Not only did I get all my questions answered, but I felt way more confident as a nonprofit leader once I ended the program. I built great relationships with my fellow cohort members, and I just really understood who I was as a leader better. I understood my strengths, my challenges, areas where I thought I didn't have interest, where I actually was really interested in. And it really helped me to make a lot of decisions and choices about my next steps. That one-on-one time I had with my coach was so helpful with the path that I've been on, and I can't thank LEAP enough for that. It's so important for leaders of color in the sexual and domestic violence movement to have spaces to grow and develop, to convene with each other, to learn from each other, and to prepare to lead organizations. We have always been here. We have always been at the forefront of this movement, but we have not always had the opportunities to show who we are. And LEAP is that perfect opportunity.
Okay.
Hi, my name is
Okay. All right. So that was Tanji. She's one of the trainers on the project, and she was also a coach for LEAP Cohort 8. Always happy to have her be part of the program and help us vision and make the program a better program. So this is what I mentioned in terms of our podcast. Has anybody listened to the podcast yet? If you haven't, I will drop some links in the chat, but a little bit about the podcast. Like I mentioned, it's really led by the topics and stories are really led by what the LEAP fellows want to talk about. So every guest speaker is one of the LEAP fellows from the past cohorts, and I'll have an interview with them to get a sense of what they want to talk about, go back to my team, come up with some questions to ask them. We'll interview them for about an hour and a half. Obviously, not everything makes it into the podcast, but we do try to really make sure that the vision and the ideas that people share really stay true to their story. And we've had conversations around anti-Blackness in the movement. We've had conversations around burnout and grind culture and, resistance toward talking about restorative justice and transformative justice in the field. So Patricia, would it be possible to receive a video of Tanji as a standalone email to us to share with our executive board? I can send you the slides. That way you can share the slides and then also the video. So yes, absolutely. I'm glad folks are enjoying the podcast. If you haven't, I highly recommend listening to it to get a sense of what folks talk about in the cohort, in the conversations we have in the webinars. One thing I really love about the podcast is that we're able to speak freely in a way that I don't think that we're usually able to be this vulnerable at work. And so just really appreciate everybody that's been able to talk so freely about their experiences in the field. I'm not crying, but it probably looks like it. Sorry, y'all. Got some eyeliner in my eye. Okay, so if anybody has any more questions, I'll be here. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat. You can email me or you can email leap@valor.us. For clarification, you anticipate about 5 hours a month working on the program. Yeah, so it could range, it depends on, some people dig a little bit deeper into the content and go back and read, some of the articles or might rewatch something or, depending on how big your project is. Like I mentioned, I really try to make it a lean project and be really mindful of your capacity. But yes, I have the group schedule up here again for folks to look at. So February 2023, that'll be, the LEAP orientation is only about an hour and a half. So March 2023 will be a 3-day academy. That's when your coaching will also start. April 2023 and May 2023 will be a little bit heavier because you'll have 2 small groups and a webinar. And then June 2023, we'll have a webinar and pay it forward office hours. And that's when you'll start thinking about what kind of topics you want to cover. And then that's pretty much what you'll be working on until November 2023. And then again, September 2023, you'll have a webinar in the beginning and then our LEAP Academy near the end. How many days of travel is there in the fall? So the LEAP Academy is 3 days. So I anticipate that folks might arrive the night before and then leave either the day of the last day or the next morning. I see someone asking, how does your review and interview process begin? When does it begin or how does it begin? Well, it will begin, let's see. It will begin in November and end in December, and then we'll have interviews in December and January. A little bit about the interview process. I will send you the list of questions beforehand so that you have it with you and you can kind of prepare yourself. But let me know if I answered your question. Aaron, is there a certificate? So there's a certificate of participation once folks have completed their projects. Someone's asking if there are examples of past pay it forward projects. Yeah, so this past cohort, I've seen folks do trainings on grant writing and how to find grants. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that as a TA provider since we get funding from OVW. But you all as folks that are not funded by the project can provide training on that. We've had folks do training on program development, and that later became a part of the training we provided in the LEAP cohort. I've had some folks do focus groups as well. I had a particular LEAP fellow that got a lot of questions from their managers around providing feedback to the folks that they were supervising, and having a lot of nervous energy, just being like, I don't know how to provide this feedback and I don't want them to see me as like the angry Black or brown woman. And so a lot of folks were feeling like this sense of like, the culture of the organization just made it feel like they were going to get in trouble if they provided their supervisees feedback around oppressive behavior or language that they were using. And so she's doing a focus group on past experiences that have impacted how they're able to supervise their white colleagues. I have also had past LEAP fellows do specific leadership development trainings for immigrants and immigrant survivors. And then that later became a book that she wrote. So those are some. Oh, Nikia, how do you inform folks? Oh, I email you. I'll email you directly about interviews and whether folks get into the cohort. All right. Sherry, who else funds this project? It's just OVW. Yeah. Just OVW. Yeah. All right. Seeing any other questions? We made it to 12. All right. Well, thank you all so much for all your questions. I hope I answered all of them. If something else comes up as you're applying, again, feel free to email me. I'll drop my email in the chat again. But yeah, thank you all, everybody. Thanks for joining. Hope you have a lovely day. And I see someone has their hand up, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question.
One quick question. So I didn't get to go through the Google form, but I know our executive director did. And so she was asking in that application for clarification, when it says executive, is that like the board or the executive director? And then when it's saying emerging leaders, then that would be the applicant?
I'm not sure which part you're referring to, but emerging leaders, yes, the applicant would be the emerging leader. And then if in terms of approval, if you're the executive director, then you would need board approval. But if you're not the executive director, your executive director is fine for approval, or your direct supervisor. Highly, like I mentioned earlier, if you have approval from your direct supervisor, that's fine. But I would also give your ED a heads up as well that you're applying.
All right, thank you.
I'll stay on a little bit longer if folks have any other questions.
Marcella, I got an opportunity to check out the application, to take a look at the application, and it seems like both fields are mandatory, both the board and the executive director's information.
Okay, I can change that on the back end then. Thank you for letting me know. And then Vanessa, I see your hand is up.
Hi, I'm sorry if you can hear lots of music. My neighbors are playing music really loud. But just a quick question. So I know that one of the questions on the application was, is your organization funded by OVW, which it said something, that was something about the language was OVW funding. If we are not currently funded by OVW, but were in the past, does that make a difference? Is this kind of just like, you need it for your own data, or will we?
It's for our own data. Yeah, it's not anything. Yeah, you're not going to be ineligible for answering that question in any way. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Wait, one more question.
Sure. Right.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm an independent artist, right? Does the I don't even know how to word this, because this is something that I've been struggling with right now. It's like, I want to register the company that I'm building, right? I just don't know where to start or how to do it exactly.
Yeah.
So let's say that, the people that gave me this information for this LEAP program, like, they see the power in what I'm doing. They see the like all the efforts that I'm putting. My company is just not registered. Would that be something that would be acceptable, or it has to be like an organization that is registered? Like, that's beyond the point where I am.
I would say, I mean, you're still eligible, but there's certain right, like if you're not a supervisor or a manager, or that's sort of like the piece where it's a little bit challenging because you don't have that sort of eligibility. If you did, you'd have a higher likelihood of getting into the program.
Okay.
I would also say it's more beneficial if you're a little bit further along in your organization when you're participating a little bit.
Yeah. I'll say this, which is like my struggle. It's like everything that you mentioned, like I've been doing, it's like I've been managing a small team. I've been executing events, have had really good feedback and impact from what I'm doing,
Yeah.
solo que no lo he hecho legalmente, you know, like
Yeah.
I just haven't stepped into legalizing everything again
Yeah.
because I don't know where to start.
Okay, well, what I will say is that your coaching piece, like that coaching piece is probably what would be most helpful.
Yeah.
In terms of getting the organization up and running and, you know, working on your bylaws and, you know, reaching out to your nonprofit council and getting some training from them as well in terms of how to start up your own 501c3. But Gabriela, send me an email and I'll send you some links for that piece too. That way you don't have to wait for the project to start.
Okay.
Yeah, because it sounds like a really exciting organization and I want to make sure that you get those resources sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Oh, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure seeing your faces and your questions drop in the chat. I hope to see your applications and yeah, like I said, take care, stay warm. Bye, everybody.